The Flat Earth East Anglia community had its first outing to Hunstanton, UK to research Flat Earth on the 13th of April 2024. The intention was to look across the Wash and check the opposite shore towards Skegness. Unfortunately, although it was a lovely day, the visibility when we arrived was quite hazy across the water. These factors made it impossible to get any decent results. In particular, the cameras, like the P1000, even though being on tripods, were shaking enough in the winds to make reasonable long-distance photography and video impossible. To be honest, it was somewhat of a disappointment. That said, though the wind remained, the visibility improved steadily, though then the light became an issue towards later in the day. Well, that's real research. Weather can make it difficult. However, as the visibility improved, not planned, but offshore windmills came into view, and the results are outlined below. Let's look at Justin's video to give us an idea of what we saw. So obviously it's shaky due to the wind, but shows clearly a whole bunch of offshore windmills with their big propeller blades turning somewhat fast. Notice other windmills going off to the right at what appears a greater distance away, and the wooden groin which reaches all the way into the sea and prevented us from lowering our cameras any further. Also, note the angle of the shot towards the main cluster of windmills to the groin, which itself is at right angles to the coastline. So to start with, let's establish exactly where we are. This is a picture of us standing on the promenade. Now, of particular note is the building in the centre of the photograph. It appears to be the Hunstanton Ski Cafe and Bar. And also note the steps over the concrete barrier which positions exactly where we are. And here is a picture taken by Google of the promenade where we were stationed. Finally, a picture of where our tripods were and the angle at which we were looking. Note the shallowness of the steps leading down and the physical groins which prevented us from getting the cameras any lower near the sea surface. So let's now turn our attention to the wind farms. Wikipedia says Lincolnshire Offshore Windfarm is 5 miles off the coast of Skegness. However, it also says that the Lynn and Inner Wind Farm is 3 miles off the coast. It really needed Justin to have started his video slightly more to the left to get the context with the land. Now, looking at the position maps of these wind farms, it appears that the southern tip of the Lincolnshire Wind Farm lies 5 miles off the coast just south of Skegness, a beam of Seacroft. This means we can now position the southern tip on Google Maps and can measure the distance between it and where we are. This indicates 13.2 miles. However, asking Google the distance from Hunstanton to the Lincolnshire Wind Farm, it comes up with 14.8 miles, a significant difference when these figures are put into the curve calculator. Turning to our camera height above sea level and a look at the tide tables for that day, the low tide was at 16:55. We took the picture at about 3:30 p.m, suggesting the sea level tide was about 2.5 metres above the datum. High tide is 6.75 metres above datum, so the tide was about 4.25 metres below high tide at the time of the video, and that's about 14 feet. I'm going to estimate the concrete steps and promenade a further 3+ feet, and the camera tripod at just under 3 feet, making a grand total of 20 feet above tide level. This results in the curvature calculator showing 40 feet of hidden wind farm. Finally, we need the height of the windmill. The key is the yellow transition ring. How high are they? A similar setup is at the Rampion Wind Farm off the shore of Brighton. Their website tells us that the bright yellow transition pieces have a platform which sits 20 metres above the highest astronomical tide reference sea level. This seems to be common to this type of monopole constructed wind farms. Wikipedia tells us that the Lincolnshire Wind Farm towers and turbine hubs are 100 metres above HAT, that's the highest astronomical tide. We now have the proportions of 80 metres for the white turbine pole and 20 metres yellow transition ring above HAT. Blowing up a still from Justin's video, I have calculated the proportion sections from a line drawn on the photo at sea level to be 11.4 centimetres white pole and 2.4 centimetres foundation ring. The picture is fuzzy and it is impossible to very accurately measure either the top of the yellow ring or to separate the sea level or horizon, which all seem to merge together. Anyway, knowing that the white pole measures 11.4 centimetres and this equates to a fixed 80 metres, the 2.4 centimetres measured of the yellow ring equates to almost 17 metres, thus showing the windmill to be 97 metres tall. However, before we can get all excited, we must consider that we were at a time of relatively low tide. Skegness tide tables for the day suggest that high tide would be 6.35 metres above datum and the low tide would be 1.31 metres. This suggested that at the time of filming, 3 p.m, the actual tide level would be at 2.1 metres above datum. This is 4.25 metres below the high tide. I also estimate that high tide is usually about 1 metre below highest astronomical tide. So we need to add an extra height of visibility of 5.25 metres, giving a yellow ring height of 25.25 metres, as shown in the diagram if it was a calm, flat day. So about 83 feet of yellow ring should be visible, and the photo suggests about 55 feet is visible. This means that 28 feet are hidden, but the curve calculator suggests 40 feet should be hidden. Still, it is a result. I think the sea level height was probably lower and was obscured by waves in the foreground and hazy visibility. From other people's experiments, we can expect the horizon to be behind the windmills, and should we use the 14.8 miles suggested by Google, we would get 58 feet of curvature. So that's only 22 feet of yellow ring which would be visible, and this clearly is not the case. Still, it really gives you something to think about.